on to troubleshooting and support. So that was the last of the kind of the Windows and Linux stuff for at least a chapter or two. Now we're going to be talking about, okay, how do we fix stuff? Like, it's cool that we're learning about these things, but you know, this is IT fundamentals where we learn how to, you know, support users, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Super short presentation that we have, and then we're going to do, I'll probably play some Kahoot, and I did add one more Windows kind of fundamentals. It's intro to Windows. Bobby said he wanted to do it for points, so I added it in there for you guys. You're welcome. You can thank him. So it's just the basics of Windows, some of the stuff that you've done already, like adding users and stuff, just some extra practice. So when it comes to troubleshooting, how many people here have been asked by friends or family members to help fix their computer issues? Most of you, right? And the ones that are not raising their hands, you're in here because you like technology, so maybe once you learn proper ways to troubleshoot, they'll be coming to you. So there is a proper way to do troubleshooting. You can't just go in and, let's say a user's having an issue with Word not opening and try like 10 different things and then like reopen Word, right? Like, we want to follow an actual plan so that way we can narrow down what exactly the issue is or what the cause of their problem is. So those are the type of things that we're going to learn a little bit about. It's also worth noting that CompTIA has a pretty specific troubleshooting methodology that they want you to follow. Okay, so the actual steps, you're going to want to write those down because on the certification test they specifically say, what's the next step after this? Okay, so this is something that you just got to drill and kill, do flashcards, stuff like that, in order to kind of memorize. But once you memorize it once, like I just took CYSA, which is the second hardest, Server Plus, which is the last of like the highest end that CompTIA offers for sysadmins, and they still ask questions that were, what is the step after this one? Okay, so it is important that you know and kind of understand the troubleshooting procedures. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is describing the basic support and troubleshooting procedures, as well as how do we find more information? Like, how do we get outside of our current knowledge base? Like, we're here with knowledge. Maybe we get a problem that's up here. How do we solve that problem, right? So I could tell you, once you understand like that data processing thing, the processing thing as well, about how stuff's supposed to work, you'll be able to apply that to all aspects. Like this morning, almost all morning, I was down in the criminal justice room working with them on one of their simulators. They have a shooting simulator down there. So like as you're like looking at a screen, it changes and you're firing a weapon. So I was helping troubleshoot that. Not that I have any experience in that or know anything about it, but I know how things are supposed to work or how things are supposed to be connected. So I was able to directly apply that to there. Uh-oh, we froze up. That's never good. There we go. Support and troubleshooting. So what is the approach that you have taken in the past to troubleshoot a problem? Like, what are some of the things that you've done? Let's say your Xbox won't start up. What have you done? Unplug it. Make sure it's plugged in. Check the power to make sure it's getting that. So let's say it's plugged in, but it's still having that issue. Strip, and it's still not powering on. Then what? Go to YouTube, see if other people have had this issue, right? Or you follow that line of from the wall power, like, okay, I can plug a lamp into that wall and make sure that plug's working, right? Then from there I can go to that power strip and maybe eliminate the power strip and then plug it in directly into the wall because I know the wall has power, right? You kind of work through, you know how it's supposed to work, and then you break that down kind of step by step. You are taking a problem solving and diagnosis kind of act, but you don't know that you're doing that. Like, you just naturally do that because you want to figure it out, right? And because IT people or computer people tend to be naturally curious, we tend to have a really good kind of feel for troubleshooting because we know how it's supposed to work, so then we can backtrack our way through that. So we're going to look at causes, symptoms, and then consequences. This is something that's going to also come up if you go into programming, and that's if-then. If this happens, then that happens. So if I flip a switch, then the lights come on, right? That is a basic kind of switch. So if I eliminate the power strip and it turns on, then we know what was actually bad in that case. The power strip was bad, right? Because we eliminated that from our actual line of power that's going into the power strip. So this is the actual model from CompTIA. So the first thing we're going to do is identify the problem. So this could be a local problem that you're physically in front of the computer, and then you need to identify what the issue is, but it could also be over the phone, like a remote user. So that's where gather information comes in. We want to get as much information from the user as possible. I am currently working on a authentication server, I think it's back here, for a local phone company. And right now, none of their users are able to log in. So the first thing I asked, I needed to gather information. Was there any power outages in the area that would cause this machine to reboot? Because it could have had an update, it rebooted, and when it came back up and installed that update, and it broke that machine. Like, it could have been that. I'm getting as much information as possible. Did anything happen? Did this fall off a rack? Did you guys have any flooding? I'm trying to get as much information as possible, okay? From there, I'm going to try to duplicate the problem. You said when I turn on this server, I get a kernel panic. I get the little penguins come up on screen and it freaks out. Okay, can I duplicate that problem? Yes, I can, okay? Then we're doing good. If I could not duplicate that problem, then I'm going to go and probably gather more information. So when specifically does this issue happen? Is it every time you boot? Is it only on Wednesdays at 12:30? Like, when is it? And that sounds like a funny question, but there could be a remote task that is causing that to happen. What are two ways that we know how to schedule tasks? One on Linux. How do we schedule tasks on Linux? Cron. Okay, and how do we do it on Windows? What's that? Task scheduler, exactly. Jumping into that last week. Just trying to make sure we keep that knowledge fresh. If possible, if this is a user that we're working with, we want to question them. Like, did anything weird happen? Were you doing something when this happened? Is there any way you can get more information? Because again, I am constantly applying an if-then analysis on every single piece of information they give me. Well, if it happens then, well, then this could be the cause of the problem. Okay, so always getting into that mindset is just going to help you as a technician. So from there, I'm going to research knowledge. Just my regular, like, how do I don't know a lot about CentOS. That's not my Linux version of choice. I don't know anything about Yum, which is the package manager that they get. So I'm outside of my level of being comfortable. If this was an Ubuntu machine that was doing authentication, I'd have no problem because that's what I know inside and out. So even on this current thing I'm working on, I've had to do a lot of research on the Red Hat website to learn more about CentOS. I didn't just say, oh, I don't know anything about it, move on. No, they need help. Like, I volunteer there because they're understaffed. So I said, yeah, absolutely. We'll work on it and see if we can't figure something out. So I researched that, and then mostly Google. I'm not going to grab usually a Red Hat book off the shelf. I'm probably going to Google it. I'm also going to reach out and maybe post on Reddit. Go to the Red Hat channel and post on Reddit or other online forums. That's another place you can go. So from there, I'm going to establish a theory of probable cause. Okay, let's break that down. Establish. So we are going to develop a theory of probable cause. So that is the what could it be? Okay, I'm not just going to start going in and change. Notice I haven't even really touched the computer yet, right? Or the device. I'm establishing what is a theory. What could this possibly be? What could be causing this issue to occur? Okay. So with that, I want to question the obvious. Did you reboot it? Did you unplug it and you didn't know it? Are all the cables plugged in? Things like that. There's been many times when I've gone in and I'm assuming that this user is at a higher level than, especially my stronger teachers. I would expect them to have tried restarting and tried kind of a baseline level of things that they can do, but you never make any assumptions at all. I once got a help desk ticket from a user that said the mouse on her computer, every time she moves it, it goes back to the center. So I walk in the room. Have you tried restarting it? Yes, all this. I walk in the room and she has a smart board. Okay, she has a smart board in her room. I walk up and I take the broom off of the smart board. I set it next to it. verify the issue, and walk out the door. Don't even talk to the teacher, like she's teaching, obviously. And then send her an email. Actually, it was a mass email at that point to all teachers. Make sure that you don't leave anything laying on your smartboards, because guess what? It's a touch screen, and it's going to move your mouse. If you haven't noticed, since you got the smartboard in your room, that when you move, your mouse moves. So, like, users just aren't going to think, like, they're not just going to put that together. Okay, you have to understand how things work, and like know that that's a big touch screen up at the front of the room. So if there's a mouse issue, it's probably caused by that. If it's not like a dead mouse, chances are it's the other touch input device that they have. So while you're coming up with probable cause, this is where you're going to come up with different ideas that you can do to fix it. Okay, so for our example with the server, I actually don't have root access to the server, and the phone company does not either. Okay, and we're dealing with an authentication server, so there's a level of trust that is required there. So I can't just change the root password because it's going to screw over all the authentication, and then every modem that's out in the field would then have to be reset, because I'd have to build a new Radius server in order to have them all talk. So it's going to be a difficult problem, but we're pushed through. Approaches to it. So one was going in there and seeing if I could adjust a older kernel startup. Okay, have to have admin access for that, I found out. From there, I was going to try to see like what actual drivers or whatever are causing the issue. Well, I have to be super admin for that as well. So now what I'm doing is migrating it from a physical machine to a virtual machine, making a snapshot of it, and I'm going to bring it up on my laptop, and I'm going to basically leave theirs alone and just play with my own virtual version of it and seeing how much it's going to break it if I change the root password. So I didn't just have one idea and say, oh, I'm done. No, I had multiple things that I could try. Okay, there was multiple things that I could do to solve the problem, and then I went through them systematically to try to solve the issue. Obviously, next we're going to test our theory. We want to see if we can, if our, what we thought was the problem is the problem, and then if not, you want to move into your other approach that you were going to look at, your other probable causes. Okay. From there, we're going to establish a plan of action to resolve the problem. Hey, look, it worked. Let's figure out the root cause of this. If I use that term root cause, does that make sense? What is the root cause of an issue? Yeah, so in our Xbox example, that would be our power strip, right? That was the root cause of why it would not power on. So from there, we're going to plan of action. For now, we're going to do a temporary kind of a workaround. We're just going to plug it into the wall, which we don't want to do long term and for our Xbox, while we purchase a new power strip, or maybe we'll go find a new power strip. Implement the solution if it's something you can do, or escalate as necessary. So I walked them through a few things. They took it to a local repair place that freaked out because it had Linux on it, and then it was escalated to me. So that's kind of how it got to me. So they did from step 6 and above, they did, and then it got to me. So they escalated it. So that's the beauty. You don't have to fix every issue, especially if you're kind of just starting off in this career in IT. At an entry-level position, you can escalate that to higher-end people for them to solve. It's outside of your skill set. And you can gauge the maturity of an IT technician by their ability to do that. And it's a fine line that you're not delegating everything and saying, I don't know how to fix anything, compared to holding on to something so long. The issue becomes longer and longer before that ticket gets closed, and then you're going to look bad because why didn't you escalate? I could fix this in 2 seconds. Why didn't you send that to me? So you guys will learn in the IT world kind of what that is, like how long is too long to be working on a problem, and everywhere you work is going to be a little bit different. So and then finally we're going to verify everything worked. And then we're going to document our findings, lesson learned, actions, and outcomes, depending on the maturity of the organization. So let's say you're working at like the hospital. They might have a place where you document this in like a wiki type of thing, or a knowledge base. They're also called KBs, or knowledge bases. If it's a smaller place, like even here at the Career Center, there's not necessarily a documentation outside of just putting notes in the help desk ticket, which are searchable, and sometimes you can go back and find them. But this is the CompTIA troubleshooting model. So you're going to have to know this inside and out, forward, backwards. So I would definitely urge you to go through the slides for this chapter and make sure you understand exactly what it is step by step. Are we missing a chair? All right, so step one, identifying the problem, okay? So this comes into making sure that you get as much information from the end user as possible and asking them questions that are just going to give you more information on the problem at hand. You know, this is where we're going to duplicate it. We're going to make sure that they don't tell us like 5 different things, especially if they're unrelated. You want to get so good at understanding how things work that if they tell you these 5 different things, you know that, oh, that's not related to this. Okay, I understand that's a problem, but the fact that you can't log into Gmail has nothing to do with the fact that your mouse doesn't work. Okay, so you need to be able to cut through some of that stuff and with those users. And there is a book that none of you will read probably at all, but one that I highly recommend if you get into this field, and that is Time Management for System Administrators. And it'll help you to really do this better. So it's going to help you with, like, you're walking down the hallway and a teacher stops you or a user stops you, how to kind of triage that conversation. Is that do it right now? Is it a desk ticket, or that's going to be a larger project? Let me work with the project team on that. To be able to just talk through that and not say, not get caught up in, conversations and being there for hours. You just say, hey, we need to create a project for that, or go ahead and put in a ticket. I'm on my way somewhere right now, but I will get back to you as soon as possible. Okay, so again, that's Time Management for sysadmins. Really good book, short read, but definitely will help you with identifying the problem, but more importantly, how to kind of triage that problem. From there, understanding. Obviously, we're going to question the obvious. That was a very obvious sentence. We're going to divide and conquer. So if there's multiple things that we can try to do to fix it, we are going to do that. Or it could be multiple people. Hey, we need a team of 5 people to go and do this. You go do X, you do Y, you do Z. So for the one that I'm working on, for example, I had him work on some other stuff at the actual telephone company in order to free up space on another server in case I do have to rebuild it. Okay, because that is one of my, one of the things that could happen. I might have to rebuild this server. So with users being down right now, that we need to make sure that we divide and conquer and you're not waiting for me to do something. We want to test our theories, obviously. We don't just want to go and say, yep, it's done, bye, and walk out the door. We want to make sure that that it was true. Our theory was a true fix for it. Resolving and documenting, you can see here with help desk tickets, that's going to be the easiest way to do it. Most places will have a help desk ticket system. If not, Google Forms is good for this, so that way that information is at least still searchable. You want to make sure that you put as much information in here as possible, not necessarily to help others, like that feels good, like that you want to help others, but it's really to help you. You want to document everything that you did, so that way, 5 years down the road, you that has this exact same issue can go back to their good notes and solve this problem. So troubleshooting actual PC issues. So let's actually get into some real troubleshooting things. Number 1 is the startup process. So when the computer first turns on, it's going to go through it's going to start up the BIOS, the basic input-output system, and it's going to kick off this process called post or posting, and that is the power on self-test. Okay, and this is built into the actual board and CMOS and BIOS stuff. Okay, this is a small operating system, if you will, that's going to go on and check all of the hardware. Okay, at this point, you are going to listen for beeps. You're going to look for LEDs. You're going to see that things are, lighting up. It's going to help you to know how far the computer is going into booting. So if you get a help desk ticket that says, my computer won't start up. Okay, well, you get there and it boots up to the Windows screen. Well, it's gone through the entire post process, so chances are it's probably not hardware. It's software related. It could be a login issue. Users don't always use, almost never use actually, proper terminology to explain the problem. Okay, that's why you want to get more information before you even get there and get as much knowledge as possible before you sit down in front of the computer. So from there, we're going to look, make sure that there's not like multiple beeps, because those are what's called beep codes. So let's say we get like 3 beeps. It's like beep, beep, beep. That's going to tell us, hey, there's a hardware issue here. I'm going to go to that motherboard. I'm going to look up the actual manual for that motherboard, and I'm going to see what those 3 beeps mean. And it could be memory, it could be no hard drive connected, it could be video card unseated. There could be a lot of things that it could be. You want to actually check for that in the motherboards. The best documentation is the motherboard. If it's a dark screen, you want to just double check cables, do the simple stuff first, and then from there, you want to make sure, like if you do have the side of the computer open, that everything is pushed in nice and tight. You might have moved their office and jiggled some stuff loose, and they forgot to tell you that part. So again, users will give you as much information as possible unless they're embarrassed about it. If they're embarrassed about it, then they're going to keep that close to the vest, okay? Like spilling their coffee on their keyboard. That's a common one. Does anything happen to this keyboard? Nope, just stopped happening. Just stopped working. Oh, really? Then why is it brown underneath here on your white keyboard? Like, especially when I was a Mac sysadmins, we had those white laptops. It was so obvious. I mean, it was just covered in, you know, really dark brown coffee. But no, of course not. They didn't spill anything on it. Same thing with like moving their computers, or if they break a cable, like they feel embarrassed. And that's the one thing that I've always been pretty successful with, is my end user skills, kind of my bedside manner. You know, as a doctor, if you've ever been to the doctor's office, you have your doctors that are really good and they talk to you like a human being, and then you have your doctors who are kind of assholes that just come in, tell you the diagnosis, and walk out. You know, and they're not, you know, they don't treat you like a human. The same thing is true with IT stuff. You have users, and then I have quotes and stuff that users had sent, but for me it was, you walked into my classroom and you didn't act like I was stupid. Because you have to remember, I was working with highly educated people. I mean, a lot of teachers have their master's degrees. They've spent a lot of time and a lot of work, you know, building up this knowledge. They just don't have that master's in IT. Just like at that time, I didn't understand pedagogy and, you know, how to teach or any of that. I'm still figuring all that out. So we all have different skill sets, okay? So never treat anybody like they are below you, okay? Don't ever treat anybody like they're stupid, because again, that's a really quick way to get fired, because users have a voice, and if a manager hears that, you know, you're treating their users poorly, then that's going to get to your manager, it's going to get escalated, and you're going to be out of there. So quick sidebar into, never treat anybody like they're below you at all. Never treat them like they're stupid, because without them, you don't have a job. Because if you don't have users that need you, then what do you need to be there for? So getting support, I already mentioned one, and that is manufacturer documentation. With the BIOS, looking up, you know, the different product codes or the different beep codes and stuff like that. But all manufacturers, Chromebooks, for example, there's a manual. The PCs in front of you, there's a manual. These desks, they all have a manual that you can quickly search. Most of them are PDFs that you can, you know, just instantly do a Control F and find that information. Also, looking at support forums, Reddit, those are also great places to look. For the sake of the test, Windows does have a Windows help built in, and that is something that you can use. Their only troubleshooter, in my opinion, the only troubleshooter that really works very well is their network troubleshooter to fix certain things that you'd have to get pretty deep with. Other than that, mileage may vary. Your mileage may vary on some of the other built-in Windows help. So last-ditch effort is usually contacting technical support. In my personal day-to-day life, I don't really use technical support in my own technology, but as an IT director, it's completely the opposite, okay? I'm always reaching out to my vendors because they know how to fix their own stuff, okay? So I'm going to reach out to them and say, hey, this is happening. That's usually my first, like if I go through my troubleshooting stuff, that's usually my first call. I'm like, hey, the stuff you told me ain't working. Like, I'm not like that, obviously. But I'm like, hey, have you guys ever seen anything like this? Blah, 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 blah. And, oh, yeah, we just pushed out an update for that. Or, no, we haven't. We're going to have to create a ticket for that. So at that point, me being a sysadmin, I'm now becoming a user for them. And now they have to, you know, come up with that solution. And again, that's more time that I can kind of divide and conquer. You know, hey, I want to let you know that I escalated this with the company. They're working on a solution. I'm going to go close these other 100 tickets, and then I'll be back, okay? Especially with if you're working in a smaller business or a smaller IT department where you're a one-man band, you need to lean heavily on your technical support person. Before you call, make sure you know what version you have. Is it the most up to date? That's the first question they're always going to ask you. Oh, do you have the latest version? You're going to make sure all patches are done, all that fun stuff before you contact them, and make sure you have good documentation of what you purchased, when you purchased it, all that. As far as personal, like I've never called Apple for support. I've never called Google or Microsoft for support, like for any personal stuff. Again, as an IT director though, always call them. So, search engine, I think you guys all know how to Google a problem. But in closing, we talked about basic, again, very basic troubleshooting stuff. We are going to do, next week we're going to have broken computers, and you guys are going to have to I'm really just trying to see how you work through those problems. Not necessarily that you're going to know, what beep codes mean and, what certain hard drive errors and network errors mean, but we're going to break some computers. The seniors are actually going to break them in the morning for you so that we can get hands-on with troubleshooting. And also what I'm looking for is the CompTIA, kind of the step-by-step troubleshooting model, because you guys are going to have to know the troubleshooting model. Any questions on that? On troubleshooting, kind of easy, kind of what you're probably doing, a little bit of pizzazz maybe because of the troubleshooting model.